So here's my extremely humble opinion about real estate investing is that we got to start with our baseline is what's your alternative with the money? Probably going to a 401k brokerage account. You're investing in the market. And fundamentally what you're doing is you are buying, assuming that you're using low cost index funds, thousands and thousands of companies from around the world run by the greatest CEOs. Now, contrary to that, if you buy real estate, you buy a duplex, a single family home, whatever, you're buying one property within one state, within one country, run by probably you, who maybe isn't necessarily the best real estate CEO in the world. So a lot of people will say, I want to diversify into real estate. I think fundamentally, you're probably actually getting much less diversified. You're actually buying a concentrated position in a single family home or duplex, whatever the piece is. So in my humble opinion, again, I think that you should be rewarded for that concentrated risk. So if the market is going to get you on average 7-8% historically, long-term, maybe 9-10, somewhere in that range, let's just say 8, what are you going to get in that real estate property, that IRR? You're probably going to have a few different variables. You should use a calculator here, but you're going to probably have some home appreciation and maybe some additional cash flow. Now, if the IRR ends up being around 8%, is it worth you taking all of that additional risk to get relatively the same rate of return you could get in the stock market long term, and it takes almost no effort to do the stock market, right? You put it in your portfolio and you leave it alone. To me, that would be kind of a bad decision. You're just not getting rewarded for the additional effort and risk. Now, I'm sure you'd talk to some real estate folks that would say, you can hold the real estate, I don't trust the stock market, and that's fine, that's their opinion. The cold hard truth is that no one has ever lost money being diversified in the stock market for a long period of time. I'm talking 10, 15 years, I believe. You've actually never historically lost money, even through the Great Recession or the Great Depression. So if your uncle's telling you that he lost money in 2008 or the dot-com bubble, what really happened was they were either extremely undiversified and they bought one company and then it actually crashed and you did lose money, or he was holding low-cost index funds globally diversified, it went down, he got scared, and then sold. And yes, that is how you get hurt. The only person who gets hurt, as Ramsey would say, on a roller coaster is someone who jumps off the roller coaster. That's the same thing in the stock market. I like that analogy. And then double clicking on a few aspects that really does allow for juicy returns in real estate is, of course, the leveraged aspect. Let's say you have $1 million cash for easy numbers. You're going to buy $1 million property in cash. No, if you're a real estate investor, what you might do is divide that $1 million into 10 $100,000 deposits so that you could go out and buy not one property, but maybe $10 million property. So now with your $1 million cash that you had, you can now go and own 10 million of real estate. And now if your expected rate of return on the appreciation is even 3%, you could just use these simple numbers, assuming no mortgage or anything right there. You're, instead of getting a 3% rate of return on just the one property, you're getting a 30% rate of return cash on cash. Now, of course, you have to deduct your expenses, so maybe your net return is substantially lower. But in short, leverage is the big piece. Now, for a mom and pop investor, that's extremely dangerous. Going back to our stock market analogy, no one has ever lost money ever in the stock market long-term being diversified. Mom and pop investors go under and lose their homes all the time because they might have a tenant who decides not to pay, and it might even be for completely legitimate reasons. They lost their job, they have bad medical issues, whatever the case is. They're not paying you, and now you're maybe taking them to small claims court. And in most states, that's usually like a 60 to 90 day process. If you're in California, it almost seems like the tenant just has the right just to stay there forever. And now you are still on the hook for paying that mortgage. Otherwise, the bank's going to say, oh, you didn't pay. They don't care if your tenant paid. They're taking the home back. And that is how you sink your own ship. And that, of course, is what makes individual real estate investing substantially more risky than buying in the stock market. Now, the other piece is, of course, the cash flow. If you bought an investment property like I did in the Midwest, you bought it for $130,000. My mortgage was $700. I started renting it to my buddies for $500 a door. It was $1,500 in rent. I was literally making more money than my mortgage was plus the expenses. So I was cash flow positive. That's a really, really great thing. However, what I find in like the 10 largest cities, we're talking the San Franciscos, LAs, etc., they're usually so saturated, it's so competitive there that a lot of times real estate investors are actually breaking even or negative on their cash flow. And essentially what they're doing is they are maybe a negative $1,000 per month against the mortgage and the expenses. So over a 10-year period, they might lose $120,000 in cash flow out of their pocket. But what they're doing is they're hoping that $1 million turns to $2 million and it doubles over the next 10 years. And that is how they're able to make money, is on the appreciation, even though they were cash flow negative. Once again, for a mom and pop investor, that's suffering a lot on a day-to-day, month-to-month, year-to-year basis, because you're just coughing up cash year over year, just hoping and praying that you're going to make a bunch of money on the sale. And then once again, if you're not a sophisticated real estate investor, you're going to pay capital gains tax, where sophisticated real estate investors who you're competing against, they're going to 1031 exchange that thing, keep kicking the can down the road. They're not paying taxes. They're just rolling that $1 million property that turned to $2 million, and then they're just going to roll it into maybe a down payment on a $6 million or a $10 million property, never paying the capital gains at the end of the rainbow here. Where mom and pop investors, that could be kind of difficult. So there's a lot of moving parts. One way to maybe hack it, which is actually what I did, is I bought a home, moved into it, had my buddies live with me, and then you could charge rent. You're living potentially rent free, or you're paying your aspect of the rent, and that's just helping to maybe dip your toes into real estate investing instead of having to actually have a separate property and completely managing it yourself. Plus, you're on site, so you can be monitoring whether or not the toilet is leaking, etc. And by the way, we didn't even get into that risk, which is, again, why I want you to get better than around 8% market returns. If you're taking a concentrated risk, I really hope you're getting 10, 12, 15% rate of return, just to make up for that concentrated risk. Now, the last thing I'll rant on here is buying a home for yourself. If you want to buy a home, a lot of people say rent is a waste of money. I don't like that analogy. I think it's true if you just comparing apples to apples, buying versus renting for the next 25 years, buying is going to be better for your balance sheet and your financial plan in virtually every case, as long as the rent and mortgage is reasonably similar in the square footage and the value of the home. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, buying is better long term. What's not better is buying, then 2 years later, moving, because you're going to have transaction costs, you're going to have a difficult time selling. There's just so much friction in real estate that it's not easy to just simply liquidate and then move. So even if you do get 3% or 4% per year of growth, which is what historically Bob Shiller and the Shiller Index has shown for single family homes, that the average growth is around 4 to 5%. Even if you get that, you're probably going to flush that right down the toilet in friction costs and transaction costs. So if you're on a 3-year, 4-year period, you're probably going to break even or maybe even lose a little money. But my favorite way ever to buy a home is if you don't care. This is not an investment. I want to own the home. I'm going to be here for 10 plus years. I love the area. I want to send my kids to school. I want to customize the space. I want to put a golf simulator in the basement, whatever the case. That's great. You're on the right track. You're on the right line of thinking. Just make sure that that monthly payment you can grow into, you can afford it, it's okay, and that this home, you're going to own the home and the home's not going to own you. Thank you for attending my real estate TED Talk. Would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have a good day.